Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Um, was anyone here last year for this presentation? I'm curious. Yeah, well, you know the drill. For those who don't, get ready for a whirlwind tour of the media and tech industries. This is gonna be like drinking at a fire hose. We're gonna throw a lot at you. It's what we do at Variety Intelligence Platform. It's a subscription extension to the Variety brand, tons of insight and data. And this is a really interesting time for Heidi and I to give this tour because think about where we are right now. I like to think of it as there's a period we're coming out of, this pandemic that certainly had an impact on these industries and many other industries. Then there's, I think, the phase that we're in now, which is, we're not in a recession, but clearly there is some, let's call it macroeconomic uncertainty, some negative indicators out there. And then, for the media side of the equation in Hollywood, for those who don't know, we could very well be facing a writer strike, and we're going to be getting into what that could do as well. So there's a lot of ground to cover, though. We're going to go film, TV, creator economy, music, metaverse. We're going to unturn every stone. Lots of companies that you know and love that will be talked about. Netflix, TikTok, Disney. We'll get to it all. But the best. Oh, a few housekeeping notes. We're going to take questions on the Go app. You just press engage, and the questions will start to come in. And we're also going to do a little interactive polling. We want to hear a bit about what you guys think about where things are, how you feel as consumers. And so there'll be some interesting polls that you could partake of along the way. That said, we're talking about business, so there's only one place to start, and that is Wall Street. And so for that, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Chang.
Thank you. I'm so glad to see everyone here. Of course, Wall Street being the best place to start this conversation because it really gives us a holistic view of what's going on within the media and tech industries. So starting in 2022, everything was looking good for the first half. And then in the second half of the year, we saw the valuations of some of these major media and tech companies fall pretty dramatically. And that was because of all the macroeconomic uncertainty Andy outlined. And things haven't materially improved in 2023, to be honest with you, but we saw some of these major media and tech stocks actually outperform the broader market. And to be honest with you, I don't really think that's a sustainable situation. If you've been following the markets this week, you know how turbulent things have been. And the economic indicators are pointing to a potential recession. So with that being said, another thing that we've been keeping a close eye on is the debt levels at these media and tech companies. Both sectors are notorious for their high debt loads, and that a lot of that was acquired during the economic expansion era. If you remember, interest rates were super low, borrowing costs were inexpensive, and another reason was because of a lot of M&A activity across media and tech. And if you take a look at the media sector in particular, Comcast, Warner Brothers Discovery are some of the most highly levered companies, and they're having a lot of trouble bringing down those debt loads. So as we've seen these media and tech companies reel with cost management and also focus on beefing up their balance sheets during this uncertain time, we've seen a spike in layoffs. A lot of cost cutting on the corporate level happens with reducing your headcount. And a lot of the headlines these days have been scary. Big media and tech companies announcing hundreds, thousands of layoffs. But I want to be very clear here, this is not uncharted territory. We've been here before during recessionary periods. You see a big spike in layoffs. And the interesting thing right now, we just got fresh labor market data yesterday from the Labor Department showing that the US economy is still adding jobs. In the month of February, 311,000 jobs were created and added, and the unemployment rate right now is still at 5-decade lows. So even though these headlines are really scary, I think the reality is that the labor market for now is still okay. And when we come out of this recessionary period, we're going to see a big boost in hiring once again. So as the media and tech sector are really trying to deal with all of these challenges, a lot of it is happening because of this recession that we're seeing in the advertising industry. When companies are thinking about cutting costs, layoffs, of course, one, but they also trim the fat by reducing budgets in advertising and marketing. Global and US advertising growth peaked in 2021 following the pandemic. And if you take a look at that chart on your left, you see that big drawdown in 2022, and we definitely expect that to further in 2023. We're going to talk more about digital advertising a little bit later in the presentation, but it's one of those areas in advertising that seemed pretty unstoppable, right? The growth was really exponential, but we've actually seen digital advertising start to slow, and even more concerning is TV advertising, which I will hit on again later, is also slowing even more dramatically. One area within advertising a lot of folks don't discuss, and I definitely feel like we have to bring up today, is retail media sales. And what we mean by that is retail media-owned platforms that sell advertising space to marketers. And the biggest player in that space right now is Amazon. And so when you're thinking about advertising and digital advertising in particular, that's one area I feel like everyone should definitely be paying attention to.
Thanks, Heidi. And now let's try our first poll question, because we're about to embark on some slides that involve what consumers are spending, and I want to hear about what you guys are spending on. And so the question that we've got, it should be teed up here, is with regard to, are you going to be cutting back, have you cut back on how much you are spending on entertainment related products in 2023? Let's see what the this yields. Oh my God.
Love to see it.
This crowd, let's be honest, is not that representative of the average public, but let's see. I mean, not shocking here. 90 to 10, okay. I think if we took the average populace, it'd be a little closer to the other way around, but that's okay. Why don't we get back to the data? Because the interesting thing with consumer spending, Heidi was talking about advertising pulling back. Consumer spending is actually doing just fine. It's this one of these weird things right now in this topsy-turvy economic moment that we're in, where some indicators are good or bad. Holiday season, it's slowed down. It has since shot back up this year. And what we wanted to point out is if you look at the chart on the left, it's a lot of the entertainment categories that are leading the way in both subscriptions and in terms of app transactions. And the reason for that is if you actually look back through history during tough economic times, entertainment always holds up fairly well. I think it's seen as a more cheaper alternative to things like, say, travel or luxury, because people need their need their leisure time spent somehow, and hey, better than, cheaper than a vacation, certainly. So now in some of these next slides, I want to talk about specific categories and how they've been impacted by consumer spend. Let's get to the box office, where the news, frankly, isn't that good. Now, if you look at the top right, you'll say, wait a second, 2022 looks like it moved far up from 2021, and that's true. But when you look at the comparison pre-pandemic, what things were like in 2018, 2019, we are way down. So far down that I think you have to question whether this number is ever going to come back up to those levels. Now, you might say to me, wait a second, we're coming off Avatar did great, Top Gun did great. Even this week at the box office, it was interesting to see a non-blockbuster in Creed 3 do well. And then there's going to be some other tests that I think you'll see 2023. If you look at the data on the left, there's a lot of anticipation for a lot of titles. There's reason for optimism for 2023. And yet I would tell you, even in the best case scenario, I don't think we are ever getting back to the time when we're going to be in double-digit billion-dollar figure domestically, and we'll see what China's market, as it comes back, does to the global numbers. But the reason I'm also a little pessimistic here is that even for the movies that succeed, you see them in week 2 and beyond kind of come down real fast, and we also need to see the volume of movies come back after they went way low during that pandemic era. Now, you also may be asking yourself, what this means for the movie theater business? If you look at that chart on the right, that big downward slope talks about during the pandemic. Obviously, a lot of theaters weren't working, but it's come back up, not all the way. There actually was a data point that came out this week. About 5% of theaters, it's about 2,000 out of about 40 plus thousand, have not come back. So the question is how much further down is this going to go? I do fear that over the long haul, it will go down. I think over the short term, I think you're going to see consolidation paper over some of this. And I also think perhaps some of you are noticing already in some of your local theaters something known as variable pricing, which is new. Some of the biggest movies now, they actually charge a little extra opening weekend. There's AMC just started something called sightline pricing, where if you're sitting straight in the middle of the theater, you got to pay a little extra for that, and perhaps pay a little cheaper for the nosebleeds in the back or way up front. I think that's the new way, that's going to be the new normal in the theater world, and it's going to help in the short term. The reason I'm not bullish in the long term has to do with what's on the left side of this slide. It's very clear coming out of the pandemic, all of the studios have compressed their windows, how long movies are going to be in theaters. It used to be like at least 75 days. Now you're topping out at about 48. Bottom line is the movie business is the movie audience is being conditioned to expect movies in streaming. I'm sure you're all seeing that. We've got the Oscars coming up this week. Have you looked at the box office for a lot of these art house movies? It was a rough year, and I think a lot of theaters that cater to those movies are probably going to go away. Now, let's talk about what I call the stage business. This is Broadway, concerts. Look on the right side for Broadway. Disappeared during the pandemic. It's come right back up, despite the fact that there's been some ticket inflation, as you see on the top right. Concert business on the left, ticket inflation as well. Here's what's even more interesting. The concert business is back bigger than ever. I mean, it's really tremendous. And I think that has a lot to do with pent-up demand from people not being there during the pandemic years. I also think there's just a lot of acts in a lot of genres. Here, trivia question, does anyone here, shout out, knows the #1 act in 2022? Anyone know? Very nice. Let's get free tickets to the next Bad Bunny. I don't have those tickets. Bad Bunny was actually almost twice as twice as much as the #2, which was Elton John. And it just goes to show there is a lot of demand out there. And some of you might say, wait a second, what about this whole Live Nation thing? A lot of backlash with regard to their pricing practices. It's become a bit of political theater, Congress getting involved. I would argue as long as demand looks like it does on the left side, Live Nation, the biggest concert promoter, doesn't have much to really fear. Let's also talk about theme parks, because Disney's in there, Comcast is in there, and you see that familiar dip. It went down, it's come back up. People are more comfortable in amusement parks. You know, talk about Disney in particular, it's a valuable business to them, the theme parks. It actually helps prop up the company during weaker times for other parts of the business, particularly during the pandemic. It was also interesting, though, seeing Bob Iger out this week saying, you know what, we probably priced a little too aggressively, and that may be coming down. Theme parks are also doing well because people are spending more than ever once they're in the theme parks. Now, one last slide on spending, and that is streaming churn. For those who don't know what churn is, that's the retention levels you keep among the subscribers that you sign up. There's more important metrics than just counting the subscribers. Churn is one of them. And in terms of the levels that we're seeing, it's concerning. Even Netflix, you see square in the middle there, which had very low churn, is inching up. They're pretty much all inching up. And to some degree, you have to blame the fact that there's too many players in this space. They're cannibalizing each other. Heidi's going to talk a little later about what I think is a coming consolidation. It's just too easy to come in and out by just a click of a button in a way that you couldn't do with the pay TV business when you were locked in for a year. As for why that is, look at the chart on the left. Yes, content can be an issue. I'm done with The Mandalorian. Goodbye, Disney Plus. I'm going to go over to Netflix for Outer Banks. But you see the rightmost bar there, and that tells the story. Duh, people are cost sensitive in economically tough times. So, like I said, though, there is another more important metric here to keep in mind with streaming, and for that, I'm going to turn it back to Heidi.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, that most important metric, of course, being profitability. For several years now, ever since streaming hit the market, both Wall Street and Main Street was really hyper-focused on streaming subscriber growth, right? How many subscribers you're adding quarter to quarter, year over year. But over the past year or so, we've seen that attention shift dramatically over to profitability. And so we have both the investor community and the analyst community judging success of these paid streaming companies based on whether or not they're going to hit their profitability goals in the coming years. So if you take a look at that chart to your top left, it's very clear there that Netflix is the only major player that is actually profitable at this point. Now, Andy brought this up a little while ago, but consolidation is something that we definitely think is going to happen in paid streaming. And by that, I mean smaller or relatively smaller streaming services, whether it's a Paramount Plus or a Comcast Peacock. I think given the situation with the increased focus on profitability and the macroeconomic uncertainty, they're going to have to start to weigh their options. Is it a smarter move here to potentially merge with another player to become more competitive? Now, I do want to run a poll here. I said saturated, competitive. So how many of you out there, I want to know, are subscribed to 1 or more, 2 or more, 3 or more, or even way more than 4 subscriptions? If we could run that poll, that would be awesome. We'll look at the results a little later. Oh. 4 or more, same. I mean, it's part of my job, but I think would do so if I was just a consumer as well. But yeah, 66% with 4 or more, that's pretty impressive. Great, so if we can get the other chart back up. I think another big development that we're paying a lot of attention to this year and beyond is going to be how the new ad-supported tiers are performing, specifically at Disney and Netflix, both companies introducing an ad-supported product at the end of 2022. And we really haven't heard a lot in terms of how it's doing. So I think over the next 6 months to a year, we'll probably get some information on just the measured success that those of how those are doing. And I think it's especially important because there's so much skepticism out there right now about whether or not the ad-supported product is cannibalizing those companies' current subscriber base. So everyone's waiting for those details, and I'm sure we're going to get them a little later on. Now, another major growth story within streaming is free ad-supported streaming TV, also known as FAST. So FAST is a very similar experience to traditional linear TV, right? You are able to surf channels, and you also see those traditional commercial breaks, but with FAST, everything is free. If you take a look at that chart to your bottom left, the growth story is written all over that. FAST is the only mode of viewing that has actually increased pretty substantially while everything else is down. And some of the biggest players right now in terms of ad dollars as well as viewership are Roku, Paramount's Pluto, Fox's Tubi, as well as Comcast Peacock. We also know YouTube is in this trial phase with FAST. So I think we can expect to see something more permanent rollout at the back half of this year. And we also know that Warner Brothers Discovery is in exploration phase as well. So a lot of companies seeing opportunity in this space. So as FAST and, excuse me, streaming overall brings more advertisers to the space, I think that's really going to give a boost to a bright spot in an otherwise pretty depressed advertising market, and that is connected TV. Connected TV, also known as CTV, is the ad market for streaming on TVs. And the charts that you see up there mostly paint this picture of a lot of growth. Connected TV has seen a lot of growth over the past couple of years, and I predict that growth to continue to happen. Now, I know a lot of you out there are watching TV and movies through your mobile phones or your tablets or your laptops, but if you're thinking about actual time spent watching things, it still happens in the biggest screen in the house, which is the TV. So that's where the advertisers are going to want to be. They have to follow the eyeballs. Okay, so as connected TV and FAST are bringing also growing, or excuse me, their revenue growth, if you take a look at their revenue growth, they're not necessarily expanding the overall pool of ad dollars out there. If anything, they're taking a lot of that from TV. So TV is still the biggest piece of the advertising pie, but because they're competing right now for ad dollars with digital, we're starting to see that steadily fall, and I think it's going to be pretty hard for TV advertising to get back to the levels that we used to see. If you take a look on the left, that paints the picture of where we are right now, which is this major shift in viewing habits. And back in August, Nielsen said that the share of streaming audience actually surpassed that of cable TV for the first time ever. And so that's definitely an area to watch. And linear TV is also competing right now with social video platforms like YouTube or TikTok, and even video games, which are increasingly popular. And so if it wasn't for a lot of the older audiences out there watching linear TV, there probably wouldn't even be much competition, because a lot of the younger audiences right now are pretty much ditching TV altogether. But all that being said, I know it's doom and gloom. I don't think we're going to see TV advertising, or linear TV for that matter, go away anytime soon. And that is because we're seeing still some big advertising magnets like political elections, sporting events like the Olympics, and like
Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl. There you go. Okay, so what is decreasing at an even more rapid rate than TV advertising? That is pay TV subscriptions. Cord cutting saw its highest level that we've ever seen in 2022. And this is something that has been going on for some time now, but we really saw the pace of that slow a little bit during the pandemic, and it has since reaccelerated. But the good news for these pay TV providers is that pay TV isn't worth as much as it used to be on their top and bottom lines. We're seeing that broadband, as you can see in that chart on the top, is a much more lucrative business for these companies. And one other thing is, I do think that we're going to see cord cutting accelerate even further in 2023, and that's for a couple of key reasons. The first being, cable subscriptions are the most expensive they've ever been, and with a lot of consumers out there thinking about, where do I want to tighten the belt? Where do I want to cut some costs? Cable TV kind of makes the most sense as one of the first places that could be cut. And second, we have the NFL Sunday Ticket. That is moving from DirecTV over to YouTube TV in the fall, and that's probably going to be the biggest driver of cord cutting we've ever seen. So YouTube TV is a virtual MVPD. And a virtual MVPD is basically an internet service that allows you to watch TV channels via the internet as opposed to paying for a cable TV subscription. And virtual MVPDs have basically been cannibalizing the pay TV system for quite some time at this point, and that's definitely a trend we're going to see continue going forward.
Yeah, I mean, pay TV, by the way, don't forget, that's the biggest revenue stream in Hollywood. That's about $40 billion a year that go from cable operators to networks. Now, what is keeping pay TV going? These are the two pillars, sports and news. And if you look on the chart on the right, you could see that this is the most reliable provider of the biggest audiences that linear TV can command. Particularly, look at that NFL figure. That's insane. The league is stronger than ever. That's why it is so important for the networks and the pay TV system to keep the rights packages in their field as long as possible. The problem is if you look in the chart on the bottom left, the streamers are making some significant inroads. Amazon, for instance, now has a piece of the NFL package. The thing you got to look out for in the coming year is the NBA rights package is going to be up. And though I bet Turner and ESPN will be paying through the nose to keep it, the league will probably break off some of that and give it to a streamer. That's just the way these deals get done nowadays. News is something. Oh, and also another thing I want to point out is a lot of you are following teams in your local markets on what's called regional sports networks, and that business has gone from one of the best to one of the worst very quickly because cord cutting is eroding the base there, and you may start to see that local, which used to be just available through your pay TV provider, may now go over the top by itself through the team. So that is a big change you might be seeing in the coming years, depending on how some negotiations play out. News, not as valuable as sports, but you think about the sheer tonnage of hours on cable, it is valuable. This is also the one genre where you're not watching news on the streaming services. That's just not what happens. Problem is that the news channels are not in the best shape. Fox News is in very good shape, financially speaking. If you look at the headlines lately, you know they're in a heap of legal trouble. that will be interesting to watch. Their rivals, CNN, MSNBC, those are having some bigger problems right now. Some key defections in primetime on-air talent have left the ratings not what they used to be, and it's going to be a tough road to come back. All these networks, I think, are looking for 2024 presidential election to really juice things up again. So, entertainment programs have largely, the best stuff has moved off of pay TV into streaming. That's why we've got all these subscriptions. And so this is part of what is this annual peak TV data point that you hear a lot about. How much programming is out there? I think we could all feel the sense of like, how do I watch all of this, right? But broadcast and cable has actually been coming down. That's why in this lovely collapsed rainbow you're looking at, you see that sagging there. But the streaming part of this is going way up. And actually, we have found that there has been, between scripted and unscripted programming, which, by the way, only Variety Intelligence Platform collects both of those data points, nearly 1,000 original series were on. Now, I could talk to you about, will peak TV continue peaking? We'll get to that in the next slide, but I want to take a slight tangent here to revisit the whole notion of the writer's strike. For those who don't know, the compensation standards that the studios have for writers is very much in negotiation right now. A whole host of different issues with regarding to residuals. This all bakes into how the streaming services pay writers, and there's going to be a very pitched battle here. I am predicting you will see a strike. I would not hazard a guess as to how long the strike was, but think back to 2007-8. That was the last strike. 100 days, cost $3 billion in damage. And that's why this is about more than just how many shows are we going to watch. Yes, you'll probably see a dent like you see around 2007 where scripted starts to come down. You're probably going to see that coming forward if there is a strike. But this is about the broader local economy, whether in Los Angeles or other shooting hubs around the U.S. We put that LA TV shoot day stat to show you that, first of all, there has been a decline coming out of 2021. Every shoot day represents a time where so many different people from all parts of the industry come together to make TV shows. And if they're not there, if they're unemployed, this has real effects on the economy. So March 20th, negotiations begin. May 1st could be the strike. Sorry, some point in May will be the strike, but it's something you have. If there's one takeaway from this deck in terms of what you got to look out for, this is the one. Now, getting back to the peak TV of it all, if you look at the chart on the right, you see these eye-popping sums that the leading companies pay for in original content. Put all those together, that's about a 2% increase year over year, which represents the lowest increase we have seen in about 10 years of double-digit booming growth that has been fueling all that peak TV surge. We are seeing a real pullback. Go back to the economic downturn that Heidi was pointing out. As these stocks come down, they're looking to cut costs. They have to do more with less. And so this is the effect of that. Netflix, I think, has gone down about 5% in its spending. It's still a massive number, but it's down. Disney has pulled out about $3 billion in spending, and they are that top yellow line on the left. Remember, they're spending on more than just content. They're spending on sports, which is even more expensive. Now, another byproduct of this streaming pullback in terms of the volume of content is there was a whole host of deals going on for the past few years. Production companies who were basically getting rich on feeding this massive boom in content. Interestingly, a lot of celebrities, people that you know from their on-screen work, I'm talking about Reese Witherspoon, Kevin Hart, Brad Pitt, LeBron James, they all have these side production companies that are pretty big businesses in their own right that were attracting a ton of investment. And I don't think these deals are going to happen much anymore because of this content pullback. And I think that's also just a function of the deal environment right now, whether we're talking about production companies or the biggest conglomerates. is just not conducive to deal making right now. That's why there's been a slowdown. As the interest rates go up, the cost of capital increases. So here's the thing, though. While things have sort of quieted down, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back big. I'm guessing by early 24. I think the deals you should look out for, I'd say the first to go is the WWE, which is very clearly for sale, and there are some very clear suitors. There are also smaller content companies that are not going to be existing in a consolidated world. Lionsgate, AMC Networks, even somewhat bigger companies like Paramount Global, which just this week said it seems like they're seeking a majority investor for their BET business. Their Showtime business was rumored for sale. Shari Redstone is going to have to make a move. You know who else might have to make a move is Bob Iger, who runs Disney. And he just came back into this job. He's got a great track record for M&A. I'm assuming that's part of why they're bringing him back. So there is a lot of activity here. We could even potentially see bigger tech players come in, but there's a reason why that's a bit harder. And for that, back to Heidi.
Wrong one. Thank you. So even as we could potentially see some media M&A activity pick up, I really don't see big tech deals happening anytime soon. And that's because a lot of these mega cap companies, whether it's Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, lawmakers have their sights set on these companies because they claim that they are too dominant in too many different business categories. One of those business categories, of course, being digital advertising, which you see on that left-hand chart. Alphabet's Google, Meta, really dominating in terms of revenue when it comes to digital advertising. But that duopoly, even though it's reigning supreme in the revenue category, has started to see their market share fall pretty dramatically in 2021 and 2022. Meanwhile, other players like Amazon, Apple, and TikTok parent company ByteDance, they have steadily been growing their market share. So this advertising environment is very difficult. Digital advertising has begun to slow, even though it is a growth category. But because of the current environment we're in, I think it'll be tougher for a lot of these players right now, and with the competition brewing. So within big tech, social media is definitely the biggest advertising vehicle. And as the data over there on the left-hand chart indicates, we saw this massive run-up in social media ad revenue growth. And then we peaked in 2021 before that precipitous decline that you see right there. And that pain is likely going to continue into 2023. These companies like Snap, Twitter, Meta, they rely super heavily. Almost all of their revenue comes from digital advertising. So this is really tough times for them. And the competition is also highly stiff in this category. We can't talk about social media without discussing TikTok, right? It's really been the dominant name in social media ever since it entered the scene in 2018. In 2022, it was still the most popular app again, which is not surprising because a lot of folks out there use it. I do as well. But as you can see in that bottom right-hand chart, you've seen the popularity in worldwide downloads peaked in 2020, and you're seeing a slowdown with TikTok as well. There's more trouble brewing for TikTok. We know that US lawmakers are potentially looking to outright ban the app here in the US, which could have huge implications. The CEO is heading to Capitol Hill in less than 2 weeks, I believe, to testify in front of lawmakers and answer some serious questions about privacy, whether or not they're giving information to the Communist Party, all sorts of concerns. Now, we also need to talk about Twitter because there's been a lot of chaos at that company ever since the Tesla CEO Elon Musk took over and took the company private at the end of 2022. Management concerns, a lot of the employees have left in hordes. Consumers, like myself, even debated whether or not I wanted to stop using the platform. And so that's a company that a lot of folks are paying close attention to, even though it is a private company right now. And interestingly enough, rival Meta might be looking to encroach on Twitter's territory. It didn't announce, it told some reporters that it's considering a text-based product that would mimic Twitter. So if that happens, that could be really bad news for Elon Musk, but that just goes to show the competition is stiff. If you give an opportunity to a rival, they're gonna take it. So another industry that TikTok has sort of changed over the past couple of years is the music industry. I don't know about you all, but I've discovered a lot of great music through the app. And so now it's this really influential music discovery tool. Andy earlier talked about the live music business, the concert business. But when we're thinking about recorded music, it's all about streaming. As you can see in that chart in the bottom right, Spotify is the most dominant player in music streaming by a pretty wide margin. And interestingly enough, I do want to throw this out there. Even though artists like Bad Bunny, Taylor Swift, Harry Styles topped the streaming charts in Spotify, 75% of total streamed music on Spotify was actually older music catalogs. And I think that's why we saw over the past several years this frenzy of lucrative back catalog deals, which is depicted over there on the chart to your left. That's just a list of some of the major recent ones we've seen, and really noticeable names on there. We have Justin Bieber, Dr. Dre, fetching insane valuations for their music rights. So when we're thinking about the audio business, music, of course, is very, very important, but it's certainly not everything. And I think that's why we saw companies like Spotify jump into spoken word content, meaning podcasts, audiobooks. And actually earlier this week, Spotify announced this major app rebrand that they're doing where they're going to feature very prominently their audiobooks and podcasts, making it easier for the users to discover this kind of content. So that'll be really interesting to see how all of that does. Another aspect, so I want to point to that chart on your top right. Podcasts really took off during the pandemic when everyone needed things to do to keep themselves entertained, but that created the situation of oversaturation in that industry. And so I think a lot of what we're going to see is, well, we saw Spotify do this already and other players as well, is like they're paying hundreds and millions of dollars for exclusive podcast deals, right? I think a lot of people here know Joe Rogan. That was one of the biggest deals. And so even though those deals can be pretty lucrative, it's such a small percentage of the overall podcasting industry. And the audio industry is certainly not immune to the macroeconomic pressures. And so even as we are going to see some growth in the podcast ad industry, it is going to grow at a slower pace than what we saw in 2021 and 2022. Now, the creator economy, much like podcasts, was a red hot space where we're starting to see even this space cool off a little bit. A lot of companies, a lot of social media companies in particular, were really fighting for influencer content on their platforms. Actually, earlier this month, I think TikTok is launching something new where they're going to allow for long-form content on TikTok for its creators and even options to monetize that content. But if I'm being honest, a lot of the economics of these deals haven't really been all that talent-friendly lately. On another note, we're starting to see even investments in this creator economy start to take a dip as well. Venture capital investments in content creation businesses took that large leg lower from 2021 to 2022. And so we're starting to see a little bit of interest wane from that community. As a lot of these marketers are thinking about pulling back their spending, that's certainly going to impact the content creators in this ecosystem. So these creators are really going to have to start to get creative, think about diversifying their revenue streams in order to stay around for longer in this competitive environment.
All right, moving forward to the video game sector. Big sector, $200 billion business worldwide at this point. Held up pretty well, a little softer in 2022. Not the best games coming out. 23 looking rosier. But I would argue that the bigger indicator of the vitality of this space is on the left. We talked about how M&A kind of went away as the capital markets dried up, but M&A in video games has actually been pretty robust all along. A number of deals, the top one being still waiting for regulatory approval, Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. Microsoft, of course, in the console business with the Xbox, and they've got that big battle going with Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo. Console business is still pretty vibrant, although I want you to note on the bottom right there, the bottom right, mobile is still really where the majority of this revenue comes from, all those casual games, and there's a lot going on here. I think the console business is still vibrant, but we're also starting to see where the future of this business is going as cloud gaming starts to take effect. Not an easy business so far. Google got handed its lunch with its Stadia business. Amazon took its lumps. but I think this is inevitably where things go. Another innovation that I would point to is Sony put out just last month something called the PSVR 2, which was a virtual reality headset extension to the video game console, PlayStation 5, I believe. And that was the second one they've done. And I want to talk about VR because if you look at on the right side, interestingly, in 2022, the number of headsets shipped came down. Not a good sign for a business that has been trying to reach critical mass for a long time now. Sony's going to have a lot of competition. That big blotch of red on the left, of course, is Meta. Its Quest line of products obviously dominates, although Meta just cut prices on its Pro line. Not a good sign as well. There's more competitors coming into this space. ByteDance, the TikTok parent company, has some in there. But the thing I want you to note is I think this business is going to undergo an interesting change that will help growth continue in the form of what's known as mixed reality headsets, which are a combination of VR and AR. Guess who's coming this year in just a few months? Apple. And we know what happens when Apple hits a hardware category. There is always impact. Not that I'm saying this is going to be like an iPhone overnight. They're actually coming in with a very high-end product, and the reason Meta has the market share it does is because the products have been sort of kept cheaper. But eventually Apple will start to iterate towards cheaper. And I think you're going to see other players in there as well, whether they're mixed reality headsets. I think you're going to see smart glasses come back in a big way. Snap is already there. Google wants to come back to it. Microsoft will be there. I really believe, it sounds futuristic, that this is going to be the computing platform of the future. It's just going to take a while to get there. Now, the reason it's going to take a while is this is where people want these specs to lead to, the so-called metaverse. Meta is in the Quest business in a big way precisely because they have spent tens of billions of dollars. Mark Zuckerberg has staked the future of this company on building out the metaverse. And he hasn't got much of a return yet. I don't know if anyone's been into the Horizon Worlds environment. It's like a ghost town. I'm actually curious. This is the next polling question, or I think I missed one along the way. My apologies. But for the metaverse, I want to get your sense of things. Do you believe that the metaverse is the real deal, or is it overhyped? Wow. All right. That's what I think. I'm with you people. Yeah, and I was very skeptical in this presentation last year, and I'm glad I've stayed that way. The thing I do want to note, though, is number one, I think when you're talking metaverse, I'd pay less attention to what Meta is doing, though by no means would I rule them out. I just think when you look at what's going on Fortnite, when you look at what's going on Roblox, that is the place to focus. And if we could just put the data back up as well. The other thing I want to note is you don't hear that much about, entertainment companies doing things in the metaverse, but when you look at some of these survey questions, it's interesting that there seems to be a consumer expectation that people are going to use the metaverse to have this immersive experience with their favorite talent, their favorite IP. And so I think the studios need to keep an eye on this space, even if it is going to take a while to get there. So while we're talking about hype, for our last slide, the most hyped of all, right? Has anyone heard of this? For those under a rock, generative AI is the notion that the machines are going to take over the creative process. And look, the technology is clearly revolutionary. I'm sure every person in this room has played with ChatGPT. And if you look at the chart on the right, you see that that's just one of a number of software applications for a number of different media. And look, I think, the investments rising on the left side tells you the story. There is going to be a lot of attention to this space. I do think it will earn its hype more so than the metaverse. But and we could have a broad conversation that would take another hour. But as far as it applies to entertainment in and of itself, do I believe machines are going to be writing screenplays? No. Do I believe that creatives of all types will be using these tools to supplement how they do what they do. Absolutely. And I'm not saying this is not going to displace anybody. I do think in the media news business, we will see some low profile content generation that does get automated. But otherwise, I think Gen AI is going to be big in terms of production or post production tools and make things that will have like visual effects and editing be cheaper. I think you'll see, and you're already seeing, some nifty innovations in terms of video and audio simulations where talent's voice and talent's image can be manipulated without them, to which you might say, gee, that sounds like there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. And there will be. This is going to be a minefield of legal activity in the coming years. But I don't think that necessarily means that the technology goes away. I think Hollywood has a history of they do paper over contract-wise whatever it takes for a technology that is going to help. And so who knows, perhaps at this time next year, robots will be giving this presentation. So thank you, everyone, for coming out today. If you want more of this kind of data and insights, please join us at Variety Intelligence Platform. We've got actually a QR code where if you want to see more of this report, you could check it out. So we're going to keep that QR code there. But as I said in the beginning, we've got another 14 minutes left. We're happy to take your questions. And so I'm not sure how this works, Beyond. I know you've been entering them on the app and perhaps...
Like, if you upvote which ones you like, it'll bring it.
Okay. I think you should take that first one.
Okay, so what levers will streaming services be most likely to focus on to get to profitability? Well, first and foremost, that's the reason why Netflix and Disney, well, Netflix is already profitable, but that's why they're introducing different options for different people. Advertising is a great way to make money, right? Netflix didn't tap into that for so long, and ultimately they had to. And so the hope is that this drives up that average revenue per user, or also known as ARPU, and that will really help to bring that bottom line up higher. Another way is, I mean, even though they're spending money on content, this environment is not great for spending a lot of money in general, right? So they're gonna have to get smarter about the quality that they put out there. And I think a lot of things that we're seeing is, I mean, I wish streamers were a little bit more original, to be honest with you, but using existing IP that's already popular and creating further content with that has been a way to keep people on the platform. So that's another way. Profitability is going to be difficult. There's definitely no one clear path for these companies, and each company is going to have to do it differently. But we are starting to see that ad-supported tier. For instance, if I call out Netflix again, they're going to do that password crackdown. That's going to help them make more money too. So several different ways to do so. Anything to add, Andy?
No, let's go on to the next question, which is about Vice Media struggling to sell itself for $400 million. It's funny.
I love this question.
It's a great question because back on that M&A slide, I was gonna go there. And it wasn't until yesterday that what this is referencing is a consortium, I think called I forgot the name of the consortium. They're interested in advancing African-American owned media. They're the ones that putting together this $400 million offer for Vice. And so the first part of your question, no, these valuations of $5.7 billion are never coming back to digital native businesses like Vice and BuzzFeed. And it's, I mean, it is just stunning when you think about how hot these companies were about 5 years ago and now have dwindled to nothing. I would be skeptical that this company is even going to get $400 million. I think it is more likely to be sold off in parts at smaller pieces. And this is not the first rumor we've seen about Vice getting sold. Man, it really is going to come down.
Just to add to that, BuzzFeed is the best way to gauge investment sentiment, right? Because it's one of the public companies that is playing in this field. And if you take a look at the stock, I'm so sorry, it is sub $2 a share. And that just goes to show that investors don't see the value in investing in these companies. And so with that being said, I think that just underscores the fact that these valuations were sky high and they needed to come back down to earth at some point. And we're at that point right now.
Yeah. So, does the collapse of
Oh, yeah.
SVB change your forecast about unemployment or ad industry spending even more?
I think it impacts our forecast of everything. So we did put this report together a while ago, so SVB wasn't happening. But I think a lot of folks out there, a lot of smart people out there, are saying that this is perhaps the beginning of the end. And what I mean by that is we've been waiting for something to trigger the recession. And this could definitely be one of the causes of that. It's very reminiscent of what we saw during the Great Recession, even though it is a bit different. And SVB is where all the VC firms were using SVB, right? So a lot of these startups, they were also using this bank, and so it just makes you think, okay, the labor market is the one part of the economy that's so strong. Could it impact employment? Yes. And I think the labor market data it's good for February, but it is backwards looking, right? We take a look at the previous month. So we have no idea what it's going to look like in March yet. So this is something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. This could ripple through every single industry, every single sector, and it could be very bad.
But isn't it also possible it might not, that this is just an isolated thing?
It could. I'm a little doubtful of that. I think there was some, I forget. I mean, we've been busy with stuff, so I haven't been keeping tabs today. But I think there was something about Roku also using SVB. That could be a way that it impacts the entertainment industry. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, I think in a way it's almost too early to answer the question. The ripple effect will begin. It's just a question of how big they will ripple. Do you think a wave of consolidations is likely in digital news publishing?
Well, they called out Penske.
Penske is the parent
parent company.
owner of the great Variety. Yeah, I think is the answer to that question. I don't speak on Penske's behalf. I'm just speaking broadly. I think this climate that we're in could very well create more distressed properties that will be in need of acquisition. Do I see some like major escalation? Not necessarily. I don't sense that there's a lot of things for sale right now. You think any different or?
No, I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. More consolidation in basically every category of entertainment and media is going to be on the horizon for sure. It just is a matter of who buys who merges with who, what makes the most financial sense. Again, this current environment economically is not very great. Interest rates, I mean, it's a lot. So I think this year everyone's going to lay low at least until the second half at the very earliest at that, and then maybe 2024. But again, depends on whether or not we're in a recession, all sorts of things.
Got it. All right. I'm not sure I understand the next question, but I'm going to try. Beyond the content, what are the features or functions that make a real difference to the users when it comes to VOD platforms, according to your expertise? It is a great question. I should have understood that. I think UX is big. I think, and the cousin of UX being content discovery. We have done at VIP, we've looked at that data. You'd be shocked for all the success the supposed streaming services have had. When you look at, it takes like 10, 11 minutes for an average person to pick something to watch. The stats are eye-popping and fairly consistent. There is a real friction there. And I think, as much credit as Netflix gets for user experience, and it is clearly far better than everyone else's, even theirs, I think, is lacking. And I think AI could become the thing that actually allows for a better experience, but we're not even near there yet.
No, that's a really good point. But to build on what you said about Netflix, is it just me, or when I'm scrolling through content and it plays you that preview, I'm like, you're giving me all of this movie or TV show with this clip? Like, do you really have to show me everything? But also, not to call out Netflix again, but the password crackdown, like, as a consumer, can I be honest with you, that really bothers me. And it makes me think, okay, well, shoot, should I continue paying for this? And I will, because it's part of my job and I love Netflix. But it makes a lot of people out there consider, oh, I mean, is this what needs to be done ultimately?
Another thing I want to throw out on this is, and I wrote an article about this recently, has anyone seen Spotify's, I know we're talking about audio streaming now, AI DJ? I think it's cool. I think it's a really interesting thing. It's not perfect. You could see it's going to evolve, and I bet. Remember, I'm the one who said this, that you're going to see similar experiences in a lot of other streaming environments because it's personalized, and I just think it's so much better than the wall of tiles you have to navigate on your typical
Wait,
streaming
Andy, for
service.
people who don't know what you're talking about, can you explain what this
Sorry about
is?
that. AI DJ it's a simulated voice that talks you through like, hey, would you like to listen to X? And then it will keep feeding you songs based on what you are consuming. And it's really well done. So I'm bullish on that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you were listening to this song. Hey, these are similar songs. Take a listen. It's really cool. Okay, next question. What's the future of the media industry in terms of journalism and how people get their news? I'm gonna say TikTok. Unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation has been getting their news through social media, which can be disturbing on many levels. And two, I mean, it could also get impacted by the AI
I
technology
definitely
as
think so.
well. So, I mean, it's tough for us as semi-journalists, semi-analysts that are dealing with all of this. But yeah,
But we are also a subscription platform at VIP, and I think there is a lot of momentum in the subscription news space, and I frankly think that's where journalism should have been all along. And I think it's going there increasingly, and I think that's a good thing. Next, do you consider that local streaming platforms in markets outside the US can achieve a strong place in the industry? Could you give examples and benchmarks? Whew, that's a tough one. First of all, it's hard to generalize because we're talking about dozens and dozens of regions. Each have a very interesting sort of certain big global players are big in some markets, others where you have local upstarts that are leading the way. So it's kind of hard to generalize there. I feel like I got a punt on that one.
yeah, same. Unfortunately, I feel like this is an area where VIP needs to put more focus, which is international.
Oh no.
I think this is a great question, but I feel like, yeah, we definitely need more insights on international businesses outside of the U.S. But we'll come back to you next year. How about that? Next question.
Yes, although I don't know that I know the answer. With the shift in paid TV to vMVPD, do you expect to see a shift in the reliance on Nielsen ratings versus potential new ratings data? I don't know. Do you know this? Good question, but I don't know the answer. Next, once AR wearables become fine-tuned and popularized, do you think that would open the floodgates for advertising companies to further monitor consumer behavior?
Another way to target people, right? With
Yeah,
advertising.
I mean, part of me wants to be like, yes, this is going to happen, but I think also we've seen how fraught targeting has become in non-AR environments, and so I wonder whether advertisers will be as free after all the issues that targeting has raised on other platforms. It's way too soon to say, but it'll be interesting to find out. How is subscription fatigue kicking into present and future revenues, especially for streamers? Well, I mean, look, fatigue is very real. You guys looked at that data point earlier, the most of you are doing 4 different services, which is, a lot, and there's a lot of people out there. I think there is a notion that this is part of the consolidation that has to be driven, that people, because again, they're not just doing video subscriptions, you're doing audio, you're doing all sorts of product, and it's not centralized in any way to maintain. And so I do feel that, this kind of fatigue is a real factor, and it may be part of what drives a smaller number of players in the space.
And that's what's going to drive further consolidation, right? Like, I don't want to pay for seven different subscriptions in streaming TV, right? Like, great, if I could do one for HBO Max and Discovery, great. That's one way that I feel like we're going to start to see streamers react as more folks out there are getting fatigued by all the subscriptions. And so, yeah, I think consolidation is going to be one of those big things because of the fatigue.
One more question, because it's 1 minute to go. With more M&A and consolidation in the streaming entertainment space, how do you think this will impact layoffs and future hiring at these companies?
Oh gosh, you guys all know restructuring is the word that everyone uses when they want to lay a bunch of people off but if you think about it, when two companies are coming together, you have two marketing teams, you have two of everything. So you got to start to figure out, okay, let's merge these teams together. We don't need 100 people in this one team. So it makes sense, but unfortunately, that's hard for the people getting laid off in this industry. So it's a tough situation. But the good thing is a lot of these tech companies and media companies are actively hiring. So we're seeing layoffs, but on the other hand, they're still hiring really talented people with specific skill sets. So the white collar space here is doing okay, and so is the blue collar situation. I think it would be bad for the labor market if we started to see that hiring come down.
Well, that's all from us. If we could put the QR code back up, because people are asking for that, please check out Variety Intelligence Platform. A lot of great stuff, just like we've been talking about today. Thank you for coming out.
Thank
Appreciate
you, everyone.
all the questions.
You guys are the best.